A Jaylen Brown trade seems silly right now. The Celtics won the 2024 title. They still have a great group moving forward, albeit an expensive one, and they do have some decisions to make around those expenses, which we've already talked about in other videos, but those decisions shouldn't involve Jaylen Brown, right? We've moved past the narrative of him needing his own team, right? There's no way that the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown this summer, right? Well, I actually think there's a likely path towards a Jaylen Brown trade this offseason, a move that would change everything about the future of the Boston Celtics. First, let's talk about the situation in Boston in general. We know right now that the Celtics are not going to be able to win big with this roster next year. We know that they are not going to be able to compete with the best teams in the league and actually be able to and be in contention to win a title next season. And the reason that we know that is because Jason Tatum is not going to play, or at least he's not going to play for most of the season. And when he does return, if he does return next year, he's not going to be 100% himself. The season next year for Boston and for Jason Tatum in terms of winning big, competing for a title, is non-existent. It is a lost season. Whatever you're trying to build moving forward around Jason Tatum with the Boston Celtics begins in the 2026-2027 season. We know that about the Celtics right now. And we also know that given their financial situation, which again we've discussed in a previous video, they are going to be cutting some salary this offseason. That might look like a Kristaps Porzingis salary dump. That might look like a Jrue Holiday salary dump. It might look like both of those guys. Derek White could potentially be on the move. And we know that Jaylen Brown is also on a massive contract, so they might have conversations about trading Brown this offseason as well. And again, the conversation is completely centered around what do we want to have around Jason Tatum in the 26-27 season. It's unlikely that he's going to come back next year. Even if he does, he's not going to be fully himself. And as difficult as it is to pivot from thinking you were going to win the title a few weeks ago to now all of a sudden trying to figure out what's going to happen in 2026, that's where the Celtics are at right now, which puts into a little bit better context the concept of trading away Jaylen Brown this offseason, because that is a much better way to get some assets, some young players, some draft picks to be more flexible, to build this team for contention for 2026 and beyond. That's potentially a better option than just keeping Jaylen Brown alongside Tatum. So what are the teams? What are the trades? What are the details? How would this actually work? And would the Celtics actually do this offseason? We're going to talk about that, but first let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. Right now is a super fun time on PrizePicks because you've got conference finals games every other night, and you can just go into these games and figure out what you think is going to happen. You pick more or less for each of these numbers. Maybe you think that Anthony Edwards is going to score well, or Karl-Anthony Towns isn't going to score well. He's going to rebound well. Maybe you think there's going to be a bunch of misses, so you're going to go with more on some of these rebounding numbers, or there's negative stuff as well. Like if you think Anthony Edwards is going to struggle against this Oklahoma City defense, you can pick his turnovers. You can go more or less for each of these numbers. You put together a selection, and if you are correct, you win some cash. And right now on PrizePicks, you get an instant $50 when you play your first $5 lineup when you use code SPORTING. Again, that is code SPORTING for an instant $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. So right now with basketball on every single night, and then as we go into the finals as well, and then we've got football season coming up in a few months, there's always something super fun to pay attention to on PrizePicks. You also want to keep an eye out for other promotions as well. Sometimes there's free squares, there's Taco Tuesdays, there's Flex Fridays, there's all kinds of stuff happening on PrizePicks in addition to that instant $50 when you play your first $5 lineup when you use code SPORTING. Go check out PrizePicks for the rest of basketball season and into baseball season, football season, all that. And thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Okay, back to the concept of the Celtics trading away Jaylen Brown. On the surface, this might not seem like it makes a ton of sense because Brown and Tatum have been the pillars of Celtics basketball the last handful of seasons. These guys have been at the center of everything they've done for almost a decade at this point, and having those two guys together building around them, in your opinion, might be the best way to build a championship contender in 2026-2027. But when you think about this new era that we're in the NBA with the second apron, how much salary and financial flexibility is valued around the league, does it make sense to have so much of your payroll committed to not only Jason Tatum, but also the massive contract that Jaylen Brown is on? And would it make more sense to split that up into other pieces, younger pieces, and future picks to add to the roster flexibility for the Celtics? This isn't necessarily about something that the Celtics want to do, but it's about something that would make a lot of sense for them. When you think about how they've built this version of the team that won the title in 2024, a lot of it was because of their flexibility. They had some other guys on their roster that they felt comfortable trading away, guys like Marcus Smart, guys like Robert Williams. They traded away picks to get someone like Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Derek White. They built a lot of this roster through trading away picks, and right now they're a little bit bit limited in terms of what their future assets are. And frankly, they wouldn't even be considering this if Jason Tatum didn't get hurt. If he didn't tear his Achilles and they had just lost in the second round to the Knicks, they wouldn't be considering this at all. It's the change in timeline that necessitates thinking more about the future and thinking more about flexibility than the Celtics otherwise would have. And in terms of a trade, if you're looking at where is Jaylen Brown going to end up, the number one team that I'm looking at is the Houston Rockets. This is a Rockets team that is arguably the most intriguing team in the entire league this offseason. They have a ton of assets. They have a great young team. They have an opportunity to add a star or stars to this group and look like a potential championship contender over the next couple of seasons if they were to do so, and if they decided that adding a star is what they wanted to do this offseason. They have a bunch of different options. They could just keep their guys because they're clearly very good. They could also look at some other stars, like Kevin Durant has been mentioned, Giannis has been mentioned, Devin Booker is another guy out there as well. But what if either none of those guys work out, or they just decide that Jaylen Brown is the guy that they would rather have? You could easily argue that on a list of Durant, Giannis, Booker, Jaylen would be the second guy you would pick amongst that group. Giannis obviously is number one over the top of any of those guys, but Durant's getting older on a one-year deal. Devin Booker doesn't have the same level of two-way impact that Jaylen Brown can have, and Jaylen has a previous relationship with Ime Udoka, the head coach of the Houston Rockets and former head coach of the Boston Celtics. So if Jaylen did become available, if the Celtics explored this option, this is a situation that would work out really well for both teams. The Celtics could get future assets. They could get role player young guys that fit really well around Tatum and around what Tatum is going to be in the 26-27 season. They get a little bit worse next year to potentially improve their odds of getting a high pick and then adding that to this nucleus. It's just a really good fit because then Houston doesn't have to give up necessarily a ton. They keep most of the main guys on this roster, and then they've got a true star at the center of their team. And you can say whatever you want to about Jaylen Brown, but he's a finals MVP. He's one of the 25 best players in the entire league. And those kinds of guys in this era of the NBA don't become available for trade all that often. And it's an opportunity that I could see Houston really jumping on. The absolute maximum that I could see the Rockets putting into this trade would be this. They give the Celtics the 10th pick in the draft this year via Phoenix. Phoenix is 2027 first. And then if they really wanted to, they could go Şengün, Jabari Smith, and Tari Eason. I think that fits well what Boston would want to do in terms of a trade package for Jaylen Brown. You get a focal point guy as a star young player in Alperen Şengün. You get a couple of role player guys that are going to develop in Jabari and Tari Eason, although they need extensions. And you get a couple of assets you could potentially trade for whatever you want to in Boston. And then the Rockets have Jaylen Brown, Amen Thompson, all these other young guys they're able to keep. Maybe they're still able to go out and get someone like Giannis or Durant or Booker, whatever the case may be, and then they are off and running. That might seem like a lot. If you're a Rockets fan, I think that's generally going to be the feedback of this trade, that is a lot in exchange for Jaylen Brown. I have 2 points for you on that. One, Jaylen Brown's very good. He won a finals MVP. It's not something that happens by accident. He is a top 25 player in the league right now. And if you can't get Devin Booker, if you can't get Giannis, if you can't get Kevin Durant, and you want to start this offseason, you have to start really looking at potentially overpaying for someone, and that someone might be Jaylen Brown. The other thing I would mention to you is Jaylen Brown fits the kind of mold of player that I could see the Rockets going after as this incredible athlete, this really, really good two-way player. Isn't necessarily a 100% polished offensive player, but he fits what they want. He's still going to continue to improve, and I really think that that is the kind of guy that they would go after, even if you think this is a ton for Jaylen Brown. And like I said, this is like the absolute maximum of what I think the Rockets would offer, even kind of thinking about offering in exchange for Jaylen Brown, but I think this is the kind of deal that would get the Celtics very interested in actually making this move this offseason. And there's no guarantee that Houston would be the destination. I think there's a bunch of teams around the league that if they found out that Jaylen Brown was available would be calling and would be asking and would be trying to figure out how they could get him. I think his value around the league would be significant given his two-way impact and given how good he is as a player. But at the end of the day, it all just depends on whether the Celtics actually make this move, whether they decide that it's time to move on from Jaylen and start thinking about the 2026-2027 season. And again, all of this comes back to Jason Tatum getting hurt. If he doesn't get hurt, they keep Brown and Tatum together. They try and run it back next year, try and win a title with a slightly different roster, but thinking more forward thinking, more flexible, more financially flexible. That is probably going to be the new mindset for Boston. New ownership group, a bunch of different things combined could lead to the possibility of Jaylen Brown getting traded from the Boston Celtics.